Welcome to the R.M.Williams Outback podcast. I'm Terry Cowley, the Senior Associate Editor of R.M.Williams Outback magazine. Thanks to Elders Insurance for sponsoring this podcast. A frog choir celebrating rain zephyrs through a pine forest. Many soundtracks of the Australian bush are familiar, ubiquitous. But what of the squirming of earthworms through damp soil or the fizzle and pop of aquatic plants photosynthesizing? Environmental artist Kim V. Goldsmith has heard it all in her bid to capture the hum of life and death underpinning our natural ecosystems. This creative practice sees Kim collaborating with scientists, farmers, First Nations peoples, and community members across regional New South Wales and around the world. Her rich compositions, audio and video recordings, often accompanied by prose, speak predominantly about climate change, biodiversity loss and land care challenges. Kim, welcome.
Thank you.
You grew up on a farm near Coonamble in New South Wales. Is this where your attraction to the power of sound began?
I think it probably did. Some of my strongest memories of my childhood growing up there are related to sound. One of the stories I often tell is I remember riding home from a day of stock work, for example, and we had this long sandy laneway that sort of linked our properties. And so at the end of the day, you'd sort of, drop the reins on your horse and let the horses head home. And often I'd pull my feet out of the stirrups and shut my eyes. And I knew where I was on that road by the sound of my horse's hooves on the sand or the gravel. And I can still hear the birds. I can still hear the sound of the bridle and the saddle and the swish of the horse's tail. And it's a really strong childhood memory.
When did you first start recording the sounds of the environment, though?
That probably goes back as far as the early 1990s when I got my first job with the ABC, and that was my first major radio job. I'd done a little bit of work in community radio after studying journalism, but the ABC and the rural department of the ABC was my dream job at the time, and I was lucky enough to pick up the post of the first rural reporter in the new studios at ABC Western Plains in Dubbo. So in those days, it was still, radio was still analogue. So I carried a reel-to-reel portable recorder, a Nagra, which are worth an absolute fortune these days, and travelled a lot of Western New South Wales because my listening area sort of covered from Wellington, just east of Dubbo, basically to the Queensland border, to the edge of Broken Hills listening region, and then south to a certain degree. We crossed over a bit with 2CR in Orange. And I would attend field days. I would go out on farm and create radio packages. So I was recording sound effects to go with the interviews and packaging those up for the New South Wales Country Hour, for Radio National. And I loved that part of the job.
So it was always for you more than just talking to people. It was trying to bring those sort of natural soundscapes into what you were presenting.
Yes, I think so. And it's about, radio is really about the imagination. I think that's the allure of sound for me, is that you can hear something, but it can mean different things to different people. I did a sound art installation back in 2009, I think it was now. And part of that had a looping soundtrack of blowflies, crows and cicadas. And we'd heated the space to about 24 degrees, and I had the scent of lemon-scented gum leaves in the space as well. And reading the visitor book for that period that the exhibition was showing was really interesting. I had a lot of people say that it evoked all of those childhood memories of growing up beside a river in the summer and spending those summers swimming in the river with the smell of the gum trees and the sounds, I think, in particular, were the things that sort of brought those memories back for people. And I think that it was that particular work in 2009 that made me realise just how powerful a medium sound really was.
Often what you do contrasts degraded environments with healthy ones. Tell me about the Mosses and Marshes project.
That's been an international collaboration. So my partner, Andrew Howe in Shropshire in the UK, lives near some Ramsar-listed wetlands, the Mosses, and I am reasonably close, 2.5 hours away from the Macquarie Marshes, which is actually a place that has been part of my life on and off most of my life. My family had a lot of friends in that area. My husband was working on a property in the marshes before we were married. And as an ABC rural reporter, it was definitely part of my patch. And it's been, a bit of a political football in terms of water management and the future of the marshes and the impact that climate change is now having on fragile ecosystems like the Macquarie Marshes. So that project really was trying to reimagine the future of some of those fragile ecosystems and landscapes. And it's very much shaped how I think my art practice as a sound artist in particular will sort of take shape going forward. So I like to do what I call more than human species storytelling alongside the human storytelling.
It's definitely something that gets overlooked.
We live in such a human-centric world. The longer I'm on this planet, the more I have come to understand that our future is very much hinged on us being more entangled with other species. And I think coming from a farming background, you almost assume that that's how everybody thinks. But unfortunately, I think the environment is used as a catch-all term without really paying any attention to the detail in it. Just how important all of those elements of those ecosystems are to a healthy environment. And we put a value on everything. I think that's the thing that we sort of, if it doesn't have a value to us, then we just don't think any more about it. And we've lost so much biodiversity. And scientists often talk about how do we save what we have left? Do we have to put a value on everything?
Tell me about what you heard when you camped in the marshes in February 2020 that left you feeling rather alarmed.
Well, I guess when you think about biodiversity loss, a drought is one way to sort of intensify that particular lens. And I was camped in a dry channel near the North Marsh, so on a privately owned property, but next to the North Marsh, which is part of the Ramsar listed area of the Macquarie Marshes. And I'm quite comfortable in that environment, and I thought I would do some recordings through the night because for that particular project I was keen to record at times of day when most people aren't really listening. So that was sort of dusk, dawn, and through the middle of the night. So I climbed into the swag in the back of the ute and had my hand on a portable recorder that I was going to stick out and turn on as I went to sleep. And the longer I listened, the more unsettled I became because it was as silent as silence can be, I think, in that environment. There was no wind in the trees. There was nothing rustling the reeds, the reeds that were left after drought and a fire that had been through the North Marsh were very, very dry and brittle, but there was no movement. There were no birds doing their nighttime song. And I had an amazing starry night above me. I mean, the light show was incredible, but it was incredibly unnerving that the only thing I could hear was one lone mosquito trying to get through the fly netting that I'd gone to bed with over my head. So there wasn't even really any insects at play. And we're talking February, so summer in a wetland that should be wet. And yes, the drying periods are important too, but there's usually some life. Once the water started to come back through the system and it started to rain again, it certainly made the documentation of that recovery all the more rich and incredible.
So you returned in May and you were greeted by deafening frog song and calls of bitterns, and it was quite a contrast.
Yes, it was incredible. It was the frog. I can't tell you how loud the frogs are. I mean, I have frogs here near my place at Dubbo, but the frog song in those marshes, those few months after the water returned, was just incredible. It was a really joyous experience, that May visit.
To anthropomorphise a bit, it's almost like they can't believe their luck after the drought.
Yes, there's a lot of talk about whether or not these wetlands do recover after intense drought and particularly fire. I know there was a lot of concern about whether the wetlands and the reed beds would recover after fire. And they do. They do recover when they have time and when they have water, but it doesn't replace what's lost permanently. And I think the concern for me that I'm constantly thinking about, that underpins what I do as an artist is the window of recovery is becoming shorter and shorter, and those droughts are becoming more intense. And obviously fire is going to play a role in that as well. And I'm just not sure how many hits some of our species can take.
Talk a little bit about your most recent body of work for a New South Wales Regional Futures project.
Yes, this has been a really interesting one. I was one of about 30 artists commissioned from across New South Wales by the state government, but through the Rural Regional Arts Network. And Dubbo Regional Council and our Regional Arts Board, Orana Arts, commissioned me to spend a year looking at concepts around the future of regional New South Wales. And I live smack in the middle of a renewable energy zone, and there's been a fair bit of angst about the developments that are happening and a lot of investment in that renewable energy zone. So to me, that was almost a no-brainer in terms of trying to sort of pick through that, but also coming at it from that perspective of the more than human or non-human species and the impact that not only these renewable energy developments were having on communities, but the non-human species in those communities. So things like the impact of wind turbines on bats and birds and even earthworms. So I came across this interesting study that was looking at the impact of wind turbine vibrations on earthworm activity. And of course, in a lot of cases, we're trying to sort of generate renewable energy alongside farming because some of these developments are obviously happening in farming areas. And so earthworm activity, which is absolutely essential to healthy soils, becomes a bit of an issue. And certainly in terms of bat and bird species, bat species in particular, some of them are incredibly vulnerable. And so the more of these wind turbines that sort of pop up in some of these places, the more threats there are to some of those species. So these are the sorts of things I picked through it was over a year. I did 4-5 residencies in short bursts around Wellington, where there's a lot of renewable energy development. I went to the Mid-North Coast because we were doing a cross-region conversation with the Mid-North Coast for this Regional Futures project. And a completely different, same concerns about the future, but a completely different set of ideas about how we tackle the use of renewables. A lot of people looking to go off grid on the coast. And then I went to the National Renewables in Agriculture conference in Albury to sort of hear what the specialists had to say and to talk to farmers about what they were thinking. And really, I have to say that nobody, or very, very few people I came across in that year, which was 2022, had given any thought whatsoever to the impact of renewables on non-human species.
I guess that comes back to your earlier point about that whole part of the world, the universe, being overlooked.
When it's out of sight, it's out of mind. What I like to think I do as a sound artist is to give a voice to the voiceless and even make what can be incredibly familiar environments like the Macquarie Marshes. For those communities around there, the marshes are a very familiar place, but many will have never heard them in the way that I can create these soundscapes that often compress time, compress layers of sound, hidden subsurface sounds, underwater, the insides of trees, the sound of water through the mud. These are the sounds that I can sort of bring to the surface with the use of technology. And that's what I tried to do with the Regional Futures Project as well. So I recorded earthworms, I recorded bats, and I created ended up being like a 42-track soundscape composition that runs for 15 minutes and basically takes you from the Central West to the coast and back again. And it mixes the sounds of those non-human species with the sounds of that human-built infrastructure that we build for our convenience, but has such a massive impact on the environment. And so you've kind of got to read the backstory to it, I guess, to understand it. But once you've read that, it makes you listen more keenly to those sounds that you might hear in that soundscape.
So you use a suite of recording technologies from ultrasonic omnidirectional microphones to hydrophones, geophones and other devices capable of listening inside solid surfaces, as you've just alluded to. I'm picturing you sort of maybe crouching down with your recording equipment, somewhat focused on the technology so you get the recordings right. Can it sometimes be a surprise even for you to hear what you've recorded, what you may have missed?
Look, absolutely. I also spend a lot of time listening before I hit the record button. I spend more time listening now than I do recording. And I think that comes with practice and it comes with age and the understanding that if you don't listen, you will actually miss something. But there are always surprises because sometimes you just can't hear with the naked ear until you put it back through some sort of post-production process. You can't actually hear some of these sounds, which is why most people don't understand that they even exist. I mean, it was thought that our oceans were completely silent for many, many years until scientists and, the military were the ones that were first hearing it. And then eventually they opened that up and scientists started to hear it as well. These are really sonically rich environments. And I kind of, the longer I've done it, the more I start to understand what I might be hearing. But yeah, I do love the surprises.
I look forward to sprinkling some of your recordings throughout this interview, but I have had a good listen myself and I was kind of surprised by the subtlety of some of the recordings.
Every person is going to hear these things quite differently. In terms of how I develop my practice going forward, one of the things that I'm conscious I need to do is to just let those things speak for themselves rather than me try to create a particular sound.
So in the story that we have run recently in Outback, you were asked what do these recordings tell you? And in summary, you said in relation to the animals, the insects, all the parts of the environment that you're recording, that they are there and that alone can be a very powerful wake-up call. That might be a place to finish up, Kim. Final word to you.
If we all take time in our day to just listen and do that repeatedly over time, one, we start to sharpen our hearing, but we'll also start to notice what's missing. And I think that's the important thing. It's hard to know what's missing in our environment and just how important those things might be if we're busy all the time. And there's no doubt that attentively or actively listening requires you to slow down your heartbeat. It's good for good for the human and good for the environment to just take that time to listen.
Great advice for life, Kim. Thank you very much for your time, Kim V. Goldsmith, sound artist.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you very much for listening.